Hi, I'm John Atack.
I'm Sam and Jon.
And we have some questions from our dear friend Rex Basterfield, who was himself briefly involved in Scientology many, many years ago. So you've got to pretend that Sam is Rex.
I can pretend.
Yeah.
The essence.
Yeah, get the essence.
Yep.
When you're ready.
Right. At what point did you think this is for me, and why?
That was I said this in the talk the other week, but I went to a friend's house and I was particularly vulnerable because I'd come home after 6 weeks away in Toulouse, where I'd meant to be playing drums in a band, and I got there to find that there were no gigs, and it kind of, I didn't have any money, and it petered out to the point where I was living on £1 a day, which brought me a loaf of bread, and I'm gluten intolerant, you know. And you had to buy water there because the tap water was yellow and undrinkable at that time. And so I pretty much went without food, got home to find that my girlfriend, with whom I'd been living for 15 months, had disappeared into thin air. And I'd had to abandon my drum kit, so, you know, I couldn't bring it back with me. And I got very upset. And that led me, you know, I was at a friend's house, and another friend, like the Incredible String Band, they were into Scientology, which pretty much ruined their careers. They went from, when they joined Scientology, they'd sold more albums, it was said, than the Rolling Stones in the 1960s. And after that, their career just went down, which is a terrible shame because they were brilliant. The two remaining founder members at that time, Mike Heron and Robin Williamson, were great people. I met them both. I spent hours with Robin, and he's a delight, and they're geniuses. But they've been lured into this. The last time I saw Robin, 6 or 7 years ago, talked with him about half an hour after a gig, and he just said, "It's all a scam, isn't it?" That was his view. But he didn't want to go public with that because he knew they might harass him, you know, so go quiet about it. But my friend was really into them, and quite rightly. And so he'd gone to the library and got this book, Science of Survival. There was nobody in the house that day, so I read the first half of it, book one, the 2 books of Science of Survival, and it made great sense to me. And I later actually was in touch with the guy who wrote it. It's a guy called Richard DeMille, who was the son of Cecil B. DeMille, and he did write it from Hubbard's notes, largely dictated. But it's not like any other Hubbard book. It's well written. It's coherent. It's not just a bunch of notes thrown together, which all the later books are, or the mad contradictions from page to page of Dianetics and Modern Science of Mental Health, which he later claimed would be automatic writing, which is how he managed to write such a long book in such a short time. He certainly didn't revise anything, and he didn't have a good editor for Dianetics. It's a mess. But this book was coherent. It had nothing about past lives or spirits, or it was just a psychotherapy where you dealt with attention units. And so I thought, that's me. And then I went there, and the people were so nice, you know, and they really were. You know, it wasn't some put-on thing. There was, you know, Soren and his wife Jill, who was running it then, Jill Pasish, and Linda and Eddie, just these really nice people. They'd all just graduated from university. The people who owned the Mission, Don and Stephanie Ryburn, had gone off to travel America to find out how to make money doing this, because they weren't. It wasn't working out for them very well, I don't think. There's never been much of an urge for Scientology in the UK. No millionaire mission holders here. And so the people were great, and I was kind of surprised that they didn't do any of the stuff that was in Science of Survival anymore. It didn't seem unreasonable. The courses were sort of £5. The auditing was £6 an hour. Then it went up to over 200 before I left. So it seemed reasonable, and they were nice, and they said, no, we do these other things now, so you do these courses. So I was really committed from the first moment. And while I had all sorts of problems with the organisation, you know, going to Manchester organisation and finding it was in a condemned building, you know, was which was painted purple on the inside and stuff. It's like, oh no, Then going down to St. Hill and finding that there were people marching around in sailor suits, and several of the women were wearing jackboots, which bothered me. Ros Vosper, for example, was she had jackboots on, and it's not a good image for me. Military people marching around doesn't fit with my kind of background. And there was a lot of nastiness. There's a lot of bullying that was going on there, and I came away from the organisation quite early on, going, they're not doing what Ron says. They're not doing it properly. But I still believed in Hubbard and the technology right through leaving, and it's why I left, because I still believed. But it only lasted for 3 months. And another significant area there was that I was given a stack of documents. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, John Hanson, who's a lovely New Zealander. And he said, I've been over and seen Michael Flynn, and he's given me these documents, and I'm never going to read them, so you might as well have them. And so it's like an 18-inch stack of documents gathered by a guy called Michael Lynn Shannon. It's often been said that I base my work on documents from Jerry Armstrong. Even Omar Garrison, who was the official biographer, he would not believe me when I said I had not a single page from Jerry. I got stuff from Michael Lynn Shannon, and then I went and interviewed people, got documents from the Montana Historical Society, Navy records, FBI records, all sorts of things. Read every book that was available. I think I found 12 or 14 books that had been written, some of them not at all well known. The first is a doctor's report on Dianetics, written in 1951 by the guy who wrote the introduction to Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, and still believed in Dianetics, but figured that Hubbard was a charlatan. He wasn't the first or the last to come to that conclusion. He'd lived for 3 months, alongside Hubbard in the preparation of Dianetics. So I read everything, put everything together, but the Shannon documents were the point where I realised that Hubbard was a liar. And most of the people I spoke to after that, I'd say, but he was a liar. And they'd say, well, so what? So, but he said honesty is sanity. The road to truth must be trod with truth steps. And it shocked me that people were so fixated upon the belief in this that they were willing to accept as truth that which was said by somebody who was evidently a liar. And I would later find many contradictions, particularly his claim to war wounds in one place and his claim that his war wounds were ulcers and conjunctivitis in another place, and that he was beating up people in Hollywood at the same time that he was crippled and blinded in Oaknell Hospital. So contradiction means that one of the statements is not true, which means that the man uttering them is a liar. And truth has been a driving force for me since I was about 14, and I started to think about what's vital in life, and it's like, what's the truth? I want to know the truth, even if it's unpleasant. I want to know the truth of our existence. And I must say, I'll add at this point, age 64, that I think the truth is probably okay, and I'm an agnostic, so it's not because I believe in anything, but I think the reality of our existence is pretty good, really. That's the conclusion I've come to, because I have such wonderful children.
4 stars.
Which is the main thing.
Oh,
yeah,
5 stars.
5 stars.
Wow.
Out of 4. Yeah. So I was a believer, and a true believer. I never doubted the technology. I did doubt the organisation and the people in it. And I sometimes noticed the contradictions, where I would say, if somebody asks for their money back, give it to them in one policy, and then in another he'd say, never give the money back, So I noticed a few things, and I thought that was because he was human, and I never did buy into the notion that he was God. Or, it seemed to me that he was capable of error. And that meant that I didn't become what's called a total convert, which is where you're immersed so much into the group that you believe everything and do it told. If I disagreed, I made my disagreement clear. I was twice shouted at by members of the Sea organisation, and I shouted back at them. I didn't realise I was meant to because they'd signed away their self-determinism for 1 billion years, I was meant to respect them in some way. Bless them. Good people, most of them.
Did you ever have any unpleasant experiences with ethics interviews?
Yes, with Ivis Bolger, who was the other woman who wore jackboots at St Hill. She told me that because I had an unpaid fine, which was about £30, that I was a criminal and I couldn't do Scientology. And that annoyed me a little bit. I pointed out the policy that said that wasn't in fact so, but she wasn't really very interested. But no, Hubbard said that you can find the suppressive people by looking at the thickness of their ethics file dossier, how many reports have gone in. Well, I think there were 2 in mine that I can think of. One of them from 9 years. So, it was a bit thicker because there were quite a lot of commendations in there where I'd been thanked for the work I'd done and the help I'd given. So no, I was not one of the people who ran afoul of ethics. In fact, I was only sent to qualifications once, which is, the idea that you haven't got something and you have to. So that's quite unusual to have had so little contact with ethics or qualifications during that time. And that was because of a contradiction between 2 L. Ron Hubbard statements about the tone scale, in one of which, Obnosis in the Tone Scale, he says that you can, one way around or the other, you can always spot somebody's chronic tone below death, where they are below death. And in the other, which was Scientology 8008, written about 15 years before, that statement is contradicted. So I was sent to clear the words because of a contradiction.
Yeah. Interesting.